the impression I had of a menopausal woman was over the hill, crazy lady, old, past her sell-by date, and it wasn't anything I could identify with. But I'd never heard the word perimenopause. I look back, all the symptoms I had in my 40s were connected.
Can I think myself out of a hot flash?
So it's basically cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's actually using your mind and your cognition to help you respond to situations yourself. Instead of becoming panicked, you can say, look, I know this is a hot flush. I know it's happening. I know what to expect.
And you're actually campaigning for these free women's health checks as well, aren't you? Obviously, it has to be subsidised by the government, but they have to see it as something that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and I'd say it is worthwhile. I'll tell you why.
Is.
Women live longer than men, but they actually live in poorer health because of these declines in their hormones. And therefore, the government is actually storing up costs later, which they could address earlier and maybe save money in the longer term and improve the quality of women's health. So I'm a big believer in that.
Improve the quality of society as a result.
The narrative in my brain was strong women power through menopause. That was the narrative I fed myself. And HRT is dangerous and natural is best. I gave in and I went to my GP, and then I went on testosterone, which I didn't know women needed or could take. And it was like, I'm back. Genuinely, all my symptoms went.
Everyone, I'm so excited for the guest that I have here today. Someone really, really special, okay? And someone that has truly changed the landscape of menopause care in Ireland. Her name is Loretta Dignam. She is the founder and CEO of the Menopause Hub. With a stellar background in leadership roles across major global brands, Loretta brought her passion and business acumen to women's health, funding Ireland's first dedicated multidisciplinary menopause clinic. Not only is she helping thousands of women navigate perimenopause and menopause with expert support and care, but her work has also caught international attention. Forbes recently recognised Loretta and the Menopause Hub for their impact in redefining how we approach menopause care. I actually have goosebumps reading this. Honestly though, you and I met a number of years ago and we've been on various panel discussions, and I've just seen the hub grow from strength to strength. It's lovely to be reading this and you're here in my presence and just knowing what you've done for the women of Ireland. It really is. It's just, Loretta, you're amazing. In this episode, we're going to chat about her personal journey, the gaps in the system that inspired her to take action, and the powerful work that she's doing to raise awareness in workplaces and across the healthcare system. So whether you're navigating hormonal changes yourself or you just want better support or the women in your life, this conversation is going to be packed with insights and inspiration. So Loretta, let's just get into it. How are you doing today?
Great, Laura. Thanks a million. I was thinking back to when I first met you, and I had just set up the Menopause Hub in Mount Marion. So I dropped into where you were working in Lloyd's Pharmacy in Stillorgan with some leaflets, and I got to meet you. And I said, oh my goodness, she's very approachable and very knowledgeable. And I could see the care that you put into the clients or the customers.
I was delighted that there was a dedicated menopause care clinic right up the road for me.
Yeah.
It was just because up till then, really, we hadn't really been having those conversations. What year was that?
2019, probably.
So just before the kind of explosion.
Oh, yeah.
So it goes to show you, and I'm sure it took a couple of years to get there as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just goes to show you how forward thinking you were. Wow, it's brilliant.
Yeah. So, and congratulations to you and all the work that you've been doing on shedding the spotlight on these taboo and what were considered embarrassing conversations that women felt shame about, that kind of thing. So there's, quite a few of us in the space trying to improve things for women's health, and I think well overdue.
Absolutely. And really, the reason why you set it up was because of your own menopause.
Yeah. So basically, I had a career before, a very successful career, I might say, working in the corporate sector for about 25 years or whatever, big multinational brands and so on, as you've said. Internationally, I worked, and in Ireland. When my daughter was young, very small, my ex-husband left. And so I reared my kids myself and did my career, did those two things in tandem.
That must have been loads of fun, was it?
It was tough going on occasions, absolutely. But, you put one step in front of the other and you just keep going, and nobody has a manual for child rearing. And therefore you just have to go with, what you think is best. And, I had help from a childminder and some au pairs and things like that. And of course, meanwhile, I was competing in a male dominated industry. And
God forbid you said your kid was sick one day, you had to go home. Like, it just wasn't really done back then, was it?
No. And the idea of, say, I'm leaving to pick up the kids. And you didn't really talk about your kids in school. You definitely didn't talk about your periods. You definitely didn't talk about menopause. You didn't talk about anything other than work. And I used to always feel that when I put on my clothes every day and went into work, that was my work persona. And then I had my home persona, and never the two shall meet. Do you know, that kind of way? Mm-hmm. But things have changed a lot. Obviously COVID and working from home and all that, which is great. But anyway, when I was 49, I had what was to be my last period, and I didn't know it was my last period. And very soon after that, within, I don't know, maybe a few weeks, I started to get hot flushes, and they were the only two things I knew about menopause. And I would consider myself to be a reasonably intelligent, reasonably well-educated woman. And I was blindsided by this, and I was horrified. I felt I was way too young for starters. I thought, oh my God, the impression I had of a menopausal woman, apologies to anybody, but this what I had was, over the hill, crazy lady, old, past it, past her sell-by date, and it wasn't anything I could identify with. So I thought, God, I must be the youngest woman in Ireland to ever have menopause. And when I started to do my research, I realised, oh no, the average age is 51 when periods stop. But I'd never heard the word perimenopause. And we're only going back to 2014, 2015, 2016. And when my friend first mentioned the word perimenopause to me, I said, go away. That's a made up word. I'd never heard of that. But then once I started to learn more, I look back, all the symptoms I had in my 40s were connected. So I ended up with headaches, went for a brain scan.
So this was all prior to your period stopping. So this is your early 40s, mid 40s.
Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. The average age of perimenopause.
Yeah.
But I knew nothing. So went to the doctor. Oh, we'll send you for a brain scan. Came back clear. I suppose that's positive. But then they developed into focal migraine. And then I got dry eye. I ended up in the eye and ear A&E department here in Dublin 3 times. Nobody mentioned menopause, perimenopause. I had pains in my ankles. I had urinary tract infections to beat the band. I was on antibiotics permanently. And then if I didn't have that, I'd have thrush, and I was in that whole cycle. I put on weight. My skin was, I felt like, oh my God, I thought I'd left behind puberty, and here I am, my skin breakouts and everything. I put on about 10 pounds. I developed indigestion issues. I had to go for scopes for that. I got really bad sinusitis.
And was this all at the same time, or is it kind of rolling symptoms? Like, every month a new one would pop up, one would go.
No, some of them were in tandem.
Yeah.
And I remember my son, who's now, I call my children my kidults because they're over 18. They cringe and hate it. But my son used to say to me, Mum, why are you always sick? So I went back to that doctor and I said, who's no longer my doctor. And I said, why am I always sick? And he just said, you're having a bad run of things. And that was it. That was the explanation. Nothing about menopause, nothing about perimenopause. And really until I got the hot flushes. And then, what do? A, I'm not saying anything to anybody in work because they might know my age, even though they could probably guess my age, give or take 5 years. B, better consult Dr. Google. And so I consulted Dr. Google, and all the information I got back was so conflicting. Don't take HRT, take HRT. It's dangerous. Try this, try that. So I said,
lose weight, do yoga.
Yeah, everything.
I got a message in from someone there just at the weekend saying that she'd gone to her doctor. She had like 12,000 symptoms. She was, I think, 50, and she went to her doctor, and her doctor told her, asked her, did she drink enough water during the day?
Oh, yeah.
She needs to exercise and do a bit of yoga.
Yeah.
That kind of shit fills me with rage.
That
still goes on. That it still goes on.
Absolutely. We hear about it every day from women. I mean, I just read a LinkedIn message this morning, and a woman was congratulating me, but also the Menopause Hub, about the treatment and the care that she got, that she was turned away by 2 different GPs, and she was dismissed. And then she came to us and she said she had a doctor who listened, who finally engaged, and she got sorted out with some treatment and everything. So I think everybody knows about menopause now, it's a hot topic, everybody must be up to speed, but actually the truth is it's not necessarily so.
Yeah, and actually, because, I put out videos all the time, particularly about the vaginal health area, because I just see it all the time. And the amount of new people that come on and go, oh God, I didn't realise that my 12,000 UTIs over the last 2 years could be related to, a reduction in vaginal estrogen.
Yeah.
So we're in a bubble probably because we live and breathe
absolutely,
it.
yeah.
So yeah, it's so
there's
important.
Still a lot of work to be done.
There is, yeah.
So then anyway, I tried everything natural under the sun, and the sage and the, Balacco Hosh that I got in from the UK and various different things anyway, and nothing was really working. And so after 3 years of putting up with symptoms, I decided to give in and go and seek help from a doctor and look for HRT. And the thing is, the narrative in my brain was strong women power through menopause. That was the narrative I fed myself. And HRT is dangerous and natural is best. So that was my narrative. Now, when I was going to have my babies a long time ago, when I went into the COOM, I nearly knocked down half the staff trying to ask for the epidural. So I wasn't going to power my way through childbirth.
Yeah.
But I said, I'm definitely going to power my way through menopause. I'd also, and I tell this story because I think it's funny, but it also tells you how desperate women are. And I was desperate. I bought a magnet, the magnet story where I bought a magnet for €35 in Boots, and it's called a lady care magnet, and I put it in my underwear under my belly button. And it's supposed to help with hot flushes, because the hot flushes were the thing that one of the things that I knew about.
And were they debilitating for you?
I'd have 20 or 30 a day now. And then at night with the duvet on and off and the sleep broken and getting up to go to the loo at night, and all the rest. So, and my daughter was going through puberty. She'd be sitting in the front seat of the car beside me, and she'd press the window down and she'd say to me, hot flush, Mum. And I'd say, how do you know? She could feel the heat radiating from me in the front seat of the car. Like, that'll tell you. But anyway, I don't want to dwell on the hot flushes really. It's just that was the only thing that triggered to me that it was menopause.
Yeah, because we know that some women don't not experience the hot flushes.
Absolutely.
And they're absolutely, even for a lot of women, they're way down the list of priority when it comes to trying to manage menopausal symptoms. A lot of them are like, I am just so tired, or so depressed, or, my mood is awful, anxious, panicked.
Whatever. And UTIs and other things.
Yeah.
And women often think if they didn't get a hot flush, they didn't experience menopause. And I'm like, sorry.
Yeah.
But anyway, so eventually, as I said, I gave in and I went to my GP, and I basically said to her, I haven't had a period in 3 years and I have hot flushes. She said to me, oh, you're postmenopause. And I said, I know. And so... HRT isn't as dangerous as it used to be. The research says, blah, blah, blah. So she's quite informed, and she started me on a patch. And to be honest with you, if the conversation had been more than 10 minutes and then more in depth, she wouldn't have prescribed that for me, because I have a bit of a kind of a progesterone sensitivity thing. So anyway, I tore the patch off after a while, and I went to someone else who specialised in hormones and all the rest. And I had an amazing consultation. And one of the questions he asked me was, any joint pain or aches? And I said, no. And he said, don't worry about that. Any pains in your ankles? And I said, yeah, how do you know about those? So I was gobsmacked that anyone would know about those. Back to the magnet. So I put the magnet in my underwear, and it was meant to help with the hot flushes. And as a result, what happened was I went into the supermarket, the wire basket went whoom and stuck to me. The chain for the trolley, whoom, stuck to me.
What was the magnet supposed to do?
Help with hot flushes.
And did it?
No.
Okay.
But it stuck to everything metallic.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember one of the doctors in the Menopause Hub saying to me, where's the science behind that, Loretta? And I said, well, there's a lot of very good Google reviews.
Yeah.
But anyway, so then I started on hormone replacement therapy, and after 3 months I started to feel an awful lot better. I started on an estrogen and progesterone, the bioidentical, body identical, nature identical stuff. And then after 3 months I went back. And then my estrogen was increased a little bit, and my dosage. And then I went on testosterone, which I didn't know women needed or could take. And it was like, I'm back. All my symptoms went. Genuinely, all my symptoms went. And I started to feel great. And I, got my eyebrows threaded, and I got a new moisturizer and all this. And people kept saying, God, you look great, Loretta. God, you look great. I thought I must have looked awful before. But anyway, I put this down to my new threading and my new... But actually it was the HRT, to be honest. My vitality was back, my mojo, because that was to me the biggest thing. Yeah. My energy levels and so on.
Can I ask you about your mood during your perimenopause, those 40s? Was your mood okay?
I didn't have anxiety, thank goodness, because I've experienced that and it's awful. I didn't have that. I'll tell you what I had more low mood.
Okay.
Not necessarily depressed, but everything was an effort. To go out was an effort, socialise was an effort. Everything was an effort. And it was like, instead of walking on a flat surface, I was now on a bit of an incline.
Right.
So it was just taking more energy to do the same.
Yeah.
And the fatigue was something else. And the lack of mojo, the lack of va-va-voom. That was really, plus all the other things.
Yeah, of course.
But, they were big things for me, because I'd be a relatively high energy person.
You don't say.
Yeah.
Never would have guessed.
So you can imagine how I was. Yeah, so I was back, and then I decided, okay, I'll talk to more women. So I held focus groups in my house, went chatting to more people to understand that, women hadn't a clue.
Did you get the focus groups into your house? Was this with an idea in your mind? I need to do something like this.
So partly I was outraged. I actually felt rage and anger, to be quite honest. I felt angry for my mother's generation that there was nothing available for them. And, when I was growing up, you'd hear about women who suffered with their nerves, who took to the beds,
or put in psychiatric units.
Disappeared from society, that kind of thing. And I just thought, gosh. And then I was thinking about my own. And so the pivotal moment was January 2018. I was in Bewley's in Grafton Street. It had just reopened. I was having a cup of coffee with the woman. She picked up a menu, started fanning her face. And I thought she was feeling faint. And I said, is everything okay? She was turning 60 the following weekend. And she said, no, it's just a hot flush. And I was offering her water. Don't go outside. You feel faint. She said, no, it's just a hot flush. I said, at 60? She said, yeah. And I said, well, how long have you had these? This woman was a really high-flying professional, somebody I admired. And she said, well, it's been going on for about 10 years. And I said, and who did you go to? Who did you see? Nobody. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to trust. And on that morning, in January in 2018, I decided, I'm going to do something about this. I'm going to open a menopause clinic dedicated to menopause. And by December, I opened in December, and it was the first dedicated menopause clinic in 2018. And nobody was talking about menopause. But through social media and so on, we had a waiting list before we opened. And we were able to see women, and the feedback was phenomenal. And I got a lot of PR around it and so on and so on. And I guess the rest is history. But that was 2018, December. So that was before Davina McCall. It was before Joe Duffy. It was before, everybody else. Yeah, it just grew from strength to strength. And then we decided to open a clinic on the north side of Dublin. COVID happened.
Okay.
And I was convinced then that was the end of the business. But we pivoted, as they say, to telehealth video.
Okay.
So we use a lot of video consultation in our clinics. And, before COVID, we had women coming down from Donegal, getting a train and a bus and a taxi to get to us. Or we'd people coming up from Kerry from Ballyferret or something.
Yeah.
And it was a whole day out of their life. And all of a sudden, we can now offer consultations to women in their home, in their car, wherever they wanted, through telehealth video. And that transformed. And then obviously, about the pharmacy industry, that now prescriptions didn't have to be handwritten and handed in. They could be sent electronically. So that was a massive step and a change for us to be able to reach women all over the country.
And now you can do that still. Yeah, it's great, isn't it? It really has transformed it.
And if they do need to have the blood pressure done, they can go to the pharmacy and have that done and send that in to us. They can, if they need bloods done, for a particular reason, although they're not routinely done for women over the age of 45. But if they need a blood test, we'll write to their GP and ask their GP, could they cooperate with us around that, and they usually are very cooperative and so on. So there's always another way, and if we need to refer them, if our doctors need to refer them out to somebody else in a gynecology clinic or in another hospital or whatever, they can do that too, to a local area. So it's made that very easy. So then that was 2020, 2021. And so I'd planned to open more clinics, but that had to all be put on hold. So 2022, we opened the Menopause Hub in Santry. And then we opened a clinic in 2023 in Cork and in Ballincollig. And so what I'd like to do maybe is open another one maybe in the Midlands and one in the west of Ireland. So I'm looking at that now.
What about Southern Ireland as well? Like maybe... Like, what about kind of Wexford, Waterford area as
Yeah,
well?
possibly. Yeah, you know what I mean? But you see, because of telehealth video, and some women are actually willing to travel,
Yeah.
you know, up to them.
Want a
So
day out.
the
They tell their families, I'm going for a health check, but sure, they're up shopping. And they'll pop into the way home.
Us. Yeah, exactly. And they deserve it.
They absolutely do.
So, and then when I set up initially, it was mostly, you know, medical team. But then very quickly I realised actually, you know, menopause is multifaceted, and, you know, there's not just one solution. You know, as I often say to women, you know, we're not a HRT clinic. We're actually a menopause and perimenopause, postmenopause, surgical menopause, premature menopause, early menopause, every type of menopause clinic. So when I opened the Menopause Hub, I realised that, you know, HRT isn't the silver bullet that can fix everything. So menopause can be very multifaceted. So we also have a psychologist who's trained in CBT for menopause, which is a proven technique, scientifically proven, and she's trained by the British Menopause Society.
Can I just ask you on that CBT? Could you just give me a little insight into what it is? Because we hear it, but some people just, even me, what is it? What do they do?
So it's basically cognitive behavioural therapy. So it's actually using your mind and your cognition to help you more or less respond to situations yourself.
Can I think myself out of a hot flash, Loretta?
You can reduce the intensity of a hot flash. You may not be able to, you know, make it not appear, but instead of becoming panicked and instead of, you know, responding in that way, you can say, look, I know this is a hot flush. I know it's happening. I know what to expect, etc. And you sort of, you know, take the intensity out of it, really. So for women who can't take any medication to help them with their hot flushes, it can be useful. Or anxiety, or sleep, mood things, so that you can basically sort of retrain your mind, if you like.
The psychological elements of menopause, it can help with.
As well, yeah. And it can reduce the intensity of hot flushes. Now, I would not have relied on that myself because I had so many during the day that I just said, no, you know, I can't do this myself.
Yeah.
And we also have dietitian and nutritionist because, you know, diet and lifestyle is really important. That's a cornerstone, actually, of menopause treatment.
Could someone not just look up on Google what they should eat?
They can, of course. But, you know, everybody's different. And what you would do in advance of that is anybody coming to the clinic, they'd do a food diary in advance so that, you know, so your food diary and my food diary would be very different.
I may not be totally honest with my food diary.
And you won't get the best out of it, Laura.
Yeah.
So that's the reason to keep a food diary. And so what women will often do, I think, is in menopause, they just haven't got the energy and they're fatigued. And they might be really good during the day. And then it comes to the evening time and, you know, they've no energy to exercise. And then they might, you know, get, you know, unhealthy snacks or the glass of wine. Or
I hear that a lot, is the glass of wine, because it just helps them to relax. And, and I can understand why.
So can I. Yes.
You know, I really can.
Yes. I drank a lot more wine in my 40s when I was going through my perimenopause symptoms than I did postmenopause once I got sort of treated and whatever.
And that in and of itself can be a difficult habit to break.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it really can, particularly if you're feeling that stress and you just want to unwind, but it has a knock-on effect on your sleep and your mood and all that. So,
and it can make hot flushes worse and, you know, can affect urinary tract infections and, you know, put on the weight and make you feel a bit groggy the next morning and you can end up with more brain fog. And do you know what I mean? So I'm not saying, listen, far from me to be a lecturer. I am not lecturing any single woman about anything, but I know that, you know, women need coping mechanisms. And I would say to any woman out there, look, this is the 21st century. We've come a long way in menopause in the last few years. And I say menopause, I mean every type of menopause. But don't suffer in silence. Like, please do not suffer in silence. There's lots of treatment available. And it doesn't have to be HRT, although it can be really helpful. So I would say, like, don't suffer in silence. And I would also say is that, you know, there is light at the end of menopause. There really is. I've been on my hormone replacement therapy for about 6 or 7 years. And I'm planning to stay on it for as long as I possibly can.
When you say that, you know, there is a lot of talk nowadays about HRT for much longer than what we originally said. Like, first of all, it was like, have the lowest possible dose for the shortest amount of time, no more than 5 years. Then it's kind of like, no more than 10 years. But now it's kind of considered to be very individual.
Very individual. And everything we do at the Menopause Hub is individual. So every woman is listened to, is treated. The consultations are about 30 minutes. You know, it's not a 10-minute quick tell us what's going on. We get all your information in advance. We actually have an app now that people can use. It's free. You can download it from Google Play Store or Google App Store, and track your symptoms. So we get all this history in advance, your symptoms in advance, your medical history.
Oh,
so
that's great.
Yeah, so that when the individual has the consultation, instead of trying, oh, I forgot to say that, and you could forget to say something that's really, really important. I could change the outcome of the consultation. We have all that information in advance so that the doctor can then focus, or the psychologist, whoever it is, can focus directly on the key things that are impacting women. And it's usually one of the top 5 symptoms that are really bothersome. That will be the start place.
You were talking about the psychologist and I stopped you with the CBT. So you're talking about the other...
Oh yeah, the pelvic physiotherapy. Very important.
Yeah.
Oh, so we talked about diet and lifestyle, really important. We talked about cognitive behavior therapy and symptoms for psychological and so on symptoms. And then there's what we call the genitourinary symptoms. And I know that's an area that you're very interested in as well. So it's all the area around the pelvis, the bladder, the vagina, the vulva, all of that. Women suffer with incontinence. So I, for example, would have had leaks when I laughed, coughed and sneezed, urine leak. If I was jumping on the trampoline with the kids or running sometimes, jumping jacks, those kind of things. I used to get up to go to the loo in the night as well, which I never did before. My mother used to have that. So I thought, oh, that must be hereditary, or it must be because I have had babies, you know.
And has that stopped now?
Oh, yeah.
Great.
Yeah,
have you had pelvic floor physio?
No,
care,
I didn't.
Or
what I did is once I started on the HRT, the estrogen was really helpful for that. I then also was worried about vaginal dryness and UTIs and things like that. So I also am on Vagifem and I take that. So I really do. And then lubricants are really, really important for if you're, sexually active, or you can take vaginal moisturizers. So I would say, and very much as you say, like, as we put stuff on our face and our hands, we should be
putting it on our fannies.
Absolutely.
It's very expensive being a woman, isn't it?
Do you know what?
Christ almighty.
I believe, and I said this before, I actually think there should be a special tax for women, a lower tax for women. And if I ever go into politics, and you never know, I would very much say that women should pay lower tax. We've had to pay for period products, so we bear a disproportionate economic burden. Period products, then we used to be mostly the ones taking the contraception. So that was not free, but it is now free. And then I campaigned with the government, got a petition and everything, gave it to Stephen Donnelly, along with Sally Ann Brady. The two of us did that, to get HRT free for women. Because here you go, you get to, 45 plus or whatever, and you're going to have to fork out more money. Now, my bill for my hormone replacement therapy, because I'm on estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, Vagifem, is about 80 quid a month. That's a lot of money that I didn't used to have to spend. And so I do believe every woman in Ireland deserves to have the economic burden of being a woman reduced.
And we thought that was going to come in January, but...
We were promised it in January.
We're still no nearer to it, I don't think.
No, we're not. And I know there's conversations with the pharmacist and the Department of Health and the Minister and all that kind of thing. And,
But we still don't know what's going to be covered either, Loretta, if I was to be perfectly honest with you, because there's unlicensed use of HRT. There's antidepressants sometimes that can be prescribed a few days a month.
Yeah.
Like, there's talk that won't be covered.
Absolutely.
So
non-hormonal.
it's an absolute shit show if I was to be,
it is.
And it's really unfair.
It is.
How it was advertised initially and now it's not happening. So I just want to be really straight about how I feel about the situation. I'm not going to go on about it because I'll just sound like I'll sound like an angry woman. But it's terrible that we got it and now we don't have it. There's no real clear path in sight.
Yeah, it's April now, and that's 4 months after it was promised. So I have gone into the media and I've said, it's an insult to women. Women's health is always at the end of the agenda. Do you know there's more research done on erectile dysfunction and male balding than there is on something like endometriosis?
I do know that. I do know that.
So, we're at the end of the queue again. We're 50% of the population. We're 50% of the voters. So I always say to women, they write to us and say, what are you doing about the free HRT? And I'd say, well, I'm doing as much as I can. But what I recommend is that you go to your local TD, your local counsellor, and you complain that you're not happy that there's a cost to you. So I believe that we should have free women's health checks, midlife health checks.
This is great because I want to get into this because obviously the Menopause Hub is a private clinic.
Exactly.
Okay. And, some people would say that, what is the initial consultation?
So the reason I set up as a private clinic is because that is the only way I could set up a clinic. Because if you're a medical card patient, you're assigned to a GP. Yeah. That's it. So you can't come to us. Well, you can come to us, but your medical card is not covered on the medical card. So women who have a medical card can come to us. We give them a small discount, try to do our best. However, I don't want menopause to be just a middle class condition.
No.
Menopause affects every woman. So the initial consultation with us is €200. It sounds expensive, but you're getting a 30-minute consultation with somebody who is a specialist, works. So we have doctors who work 5 days a week in menopause. That is all they do.
You're guaranteed to walk out with something in your hand that's going to help you, girls. No, and I think it's really important because I get messages all the time from people that go to the doctors and they don't get heard.
Yes.
But it is. So the price
is
put people off.
But I think, and I don't mean, you'll probably get people writing in and saying, how dare you? But, how much would we spend to get our hair done and our colour and our cut and all that kind of thing? How much do we spend on our kids' trainers or the latest, whatever, runners? We put ourselves last for the things that are really, really important. And I would say that is, probably the best money you could ever spend in general. I can't say it's going to fix everybody because that's not always true. And then after 3 months, you're booked in. So before you leave after the first consultation, you're booked in for 3-month review. That's €100. And that's to make sure that, see how you go, whatever the treatment plan is. And then it's the chance to tweak it or change it or whatever. And if you want to go back to your GP after that, great. Some women say to us, look, Loretta, I really don't trust my GP to be able to, look after me. Other women do go back to their GP and then they come back to us maybe if they need a change or tweak to their medication. To be honest with you, I would love to offer the service free to everybody, but, I can't because I have to pay doctors, have to pay staff, administrators and so on. So, is it expensive? I think it's all relative. But I would just say to women, go and seek help, even if it's not the Menopause Hub and you want to go somewhere locally. Go and seek help because there are lots of different treatment options available. And, we no longer have to suffer in silence.
Yeah. And you're actually campaigning for these free women's health checks as well, aren't you? Which you'd love to, obviously it has to be subsidised by the government, but they have to see it as something that's worthwhile.
Yeah, and I'd say it is worthwhile. I'll tell you why.
It absolutely is.
Because when women we call it a midlife health check, things like osteoporosis are something that women can potentially experience post-menopause because of the decline in estrogen. There's a huge cost to treating osteoporosis, osteopenia. Women who break bones end up in hospital, end up with losing their independence, end up in nursing homes. Then there's also the heart health risk. Heart disease is the number one killer of women in Ireland and globally. So there's a lot of heart disease being stored up. And therefore, if you could put in place a midlife health check, maybe have a DEXA scan, a bone density scan, you get that free in Ireland after 65.
But sure, the damage is done by 65.
Exactly. So I always like to appeal, I like facts. I like to appeal to the business, to the economic sense of all of this. So basically, we have this bill associated with women's health. Women live longer than men, but they actually live in poorer health because of these declines in their hormones. And therefore, the government is actually storing up costs later, but, which they could address or look to address earlier and maybe save money in the longer term and improve the quality of women's health.
And improve the quality of society as a result. Because these women are
mothers, partners, sisters.
They're grandmothers. They are also workers.
Yeah.
And the biggest, I think the largest growing demographic in the workplace is women in perimenopause, menopause.
Absolutely. And so that's why I actually set up a sister business, if you like, called Menopause Hub Academy.
Of course you do, because you've loads of time in your hands, don't you?
Well, I
You just see a problem and you fix it, and then you're like, oh, and here's another problem. I'm going to try and do something like this.
Probably my biggest talent or skill is my can-do mentality, is my ability to just get on and do it. That's probably my biggest skill. We do research. We have a survey out, actually, which if your listeners would be kind enough to fill in. We've been doing a menopause and perimenopause survey since 2018 when no data existed in Ireland. And all that information that we got in the last survey, we had 3,044 women complete the survey, which is fantastic. And what we do is we use that data to go and talk to the government, to go and talk to ministers, to go and talk to the healthcare professionals, to talk to the Department of Health, to talk to the media, to talk to the workplaces, to talk to every different stakeholder, because that data helps us say, this isn't just my opinion, Loretta Dignam, this is what we hear back from thousands of women across Ireland. So it'll be on our website, the menopausehub.ie, or through our Menopause Hub Academy, or the side that looks after business. But what I found out through that research is that up to 10% of women leave work because of their symptoms. And this is the age that women are coming into their own, coming into their power. They're taking on more responsibility, bigger jobs, going for promotion, trying to get on boards. And we have a gender pay gap. So this is going to help close a gender pay gap if we get more women into these roles. What happens? They're leaving. 4 in 10 considered giving up work. Can you believe that?
And what a brain drain that is. Like all those years of experience, have you accumulated them together?
100%. This infuriates me as well. So we started then offering, and 4 in 10 women take time off work. The amount of time I had off work going for the brain scan here and going for the dry eye there and the physio for the ankles and the scope for the
reflux or whatever.
The reflux, all these different things. I mean, if you'd said to me, did you take time off work because of your menopause? I wouldn't have thought I took time off until I looked back and went, oh yeah, I was off for that. So all of these things impact in the workplace. And so therefore, if we get organisations to be supportive and what we call menopause inclusive, they can actually support their colleagues to stay in work. And women tell us that the biggest stressor they have is hiding their symptoms.
I know. It's terrible. It's like hiding you have children, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Or hiding that they're sick.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, and so we work with organisations. We train managers, we train HR, we train menopause champions.
And do you go in and do that yourself?
Yes, some of it I do. We have a team that goes in. We also have e-learning for bigger companies. It's all CPD accredited training. And we also have launched accreditation for organisations. So we have some companies now that have an accredited logo saying that they're menopause inclusive. So Lidl, Aldi, IRFU, Conciliant Health and more.
You need to get into the GAA now and get them menopause
Absolutely.
Approved, okay?
That's next. That's next. Have you any contacts?
Fabulous.
Yeah. So I look after, we look after the workplace. And then I've just closed a fundraising round last year where I went out to private investors and Enterprise Ireland to give me funding to actually accelerate that part of the business and go internationally. So now I'm going into the UK and looking abroad, because Ireland and the UK actually lead out on the whole thing about menopause education, whether it's personally for women or professionally in the workplace. America, the US, they're only catching up. They're about 5 years behind. Continental Europe.
Is America about 5 years behind?
Oh, yeah.
Well, it'll be even more behind now after Trump gets...
Oh, exactly.
Like, things are already going backwards for women over there, so that's quite frightening.
Yeah. And in Germany, women don't believe menopause is like a topic for the workplace. Scandinavia, all those different countries.
Really? I would have thought Scandinavia would be quite, forward thinking.
And I lived in Sweden when, honest to God, the benefits for women were absolutely incredible.
When they're having babies.
90s. Yeah. But not necessarily menopause. Yeah. So Ireland and the UK, we're global leaders. And that's why Forbes obviously chose to kind of include me in their top 50 over 50 for the work that I'm doing. So I'm on a kind of a crusade now to, make menopause mainstream internationally, So many women impacted, my goodness.
I know, I see it and hear it all the time.
Yeah.
Loretta, were you a good student when you were in school, or were you a bit of a
oldie? I was honest to God, I was such a goody two shoes. I was in the Legion of Mary. I was in the Order of Malta. I was always helping people, actually. I didn't drink until I went to university. Oh my God, goody two shoes. Very studious, honestly.
Were you?
Then in my 20s, I went a bit mad.
Did you? Okay.
And
I think we all did that.
Yeah, enjoyed that thoroughly.
Yeah.
And to this day now, I'd be play hard, work hard
Okay,
kind of
good
person.
woman. I like
Yeah,
it.
I do. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. And I have a daughter who's 23, and sometimes I say, God, maybe you need to play a little harder.
Okay.
What mother is busy telling her children to play harder?
Yeah, I know. It's gas.
Yes,
So did you ever envisage that you'd be doing something like this though? Because in the corporate world that you worked in, what did you do? What
I was in marketing. I worked for Diageo, for Kerry Group, for Mars.
Okay.
I won Marketer of the Year when I was working in Jacob Fruitfield. I lectured in the Michael Smurfit Business School on their MBA and MSc programs. I was on the board of the Abbey Theatre. I chaired their Gender Equality Committee when they did a big issue around gender equality. That was something actually that encouraged me to do more for women, because I saw the power of policy to make changes in the theatre community.
Okay.
And so that was fascinating. Yeah, so I was doing all that, and then I had this idea. And then I just decided, actually, and that's one thing that happens, I think, in menopause as well, is that, I kind of wanted to learn, I wanted to do new things. I'd kind of said, right, I've done enough of that. My hormones are even, so I don't have ups and downs every month of periods. My children are, grown up. They don't need me in the same way. My elderly parents, whom I would have been caring for in their, not full time now, when I was in my 40s, have passed away now. I have some elderly relatives, but I have a lot more free time. I have a lot of wisdom. I don't
That's so
care
lovely to
so
hear.
much. I have more confidence. I really don't care what people think of me, and therefore there's a newfound freedom in that. And every day is a school day. I swear to God, I have learned so much in the last 6 years. I never envisaged that I'd be doing this. Never envisaged.
Yeah.
And I'm going to. I know you've a book. I'm about to put pen to paper on a book.
Good for you.
Yeah, and there's always things to do. Every day I have ideas.
But isn't it so interesting? Because I think sometimes women think, "Oh, I'll be too old now to jump ship and set up my own business." Absolutely not. So I did it at what, 41?
Yeah.
You did it at 51?
54.
54. So I think that there's such endless possibilities for us. And
Absolutely.
and I think sometimes women can be the best cheerleaders for each other as well. Can't they, really?
Yeah. I'm part of a number of different networks. I'm part of EY, Entrepreneurial Winning Women, which is Ernst & Young. And we're in a group. I'm now in this Forbes Top 50 over 50 group. And everybody is always, encouraging each other. If they have any issues, or queries or challenges, they can put them into the WhatsApp groups. And
they swap patches for gels and all the other kind of thing when they're
stuck. We don't
out.
encourage that. But yes.
Okay. Can I just ask you about ladies kind of that feel that they missed out on the whole perimenopause, menopause conversation?
Yeah.
So say women that would have been in around 50 when the WHI study came out, now they're in their early 70s, or even women that were a little bit younger than that, they're in their 60s and they feel they got no care and they want to protect their bones, or maybe they still have the odd hot flash or something like that. Is there hope for them? Can they go to a doctor in your clinic and get help, or come out with a prescription for HRT? How does it work?
So basically what we'd say is that, it depends. If you're a 45-year-old or a 51-year-old woman, you may not necessarily get HRT either. It depends. So we very much take an individualized approach in the clinic. Every person is an individual, their situation. So everything depends on your medical history, your family history, your own health, and your symptoms. And each individual is treated as an individual. And yes, we have had women in past their 60s coming to us who would maybe still have symptoms or want to discuss treatment options for the future. And as I said, it depends on all of those things. So I would say, if you really do want to investigate this, be prepared to have a conversation, and depending on a lot of things, it may be possible for you to start hormone replacement therapy. And the risks go up the longer your body is without estrogen. That's the issue. So, the plaque starts to set down the arteries of the heart, and so on. So that's why the longer it is, the greater the risk. But, there are some tests that you can be sent for to check out things, your heart and calcification on the heart.
Score and stuff like that.
And all of that kind of thing. So it is possible. We've had women who've come to us in their 70s who maybe have been on HRT with their GP, and the GP says, I'm not prescribing it anymore after 10 years or whatever the thing. And if they've been on hormone replacement therapy and taking into account all those other things about their general health, we would prescribe, and say for example myself, I'm saying, well, I think I'll stay on HRT forever. Now, if something happens to my health and I develop some major risk factor, well, then I have to reconsider that, which is why it's important to go back and get checked. And, like going off to Spain and getting your patches, I know they're cheaper and I know the supply is probably more guaranteed, but, without checking back in with your doctor, doing the blood pressure checks and so on, I don't think that's a good idea to stay on hormone replacement therapy for years and never go near a doctor. So anybody's doing that, I'd suggest you check in on that.
I would absolutely second that.
Yes, very important.
Nothing wrong with going to Spain to get your patches if they're cheaper, but absolutely you need to be under the care of a doctor.
Absolutely. And so, I plan, as I said, and we've heard women say to us, about HRT, I went off it and I just never felt as vital as I did when I was on it. I didn't feel my hair and my skin and my vava-voom was as good, and they went back on it. Some others have come off it and said, yeah, I'm fine, I feel okay, and that's fine too. So it's all down to individuals.
It so is everything to do with the menopause, and whether it's diet, exercise, supplementation,
everything.
CBT, it all needs to be kind of taken into account. Yeah. Are you seeing a trend of younger women coming into, even women in their late 30s, very, maybe thinking, I've XYZ symptom, I think I'm perimenopausal, I want to go on HRT?
Yeah, I do think HRT is a hot topic, pun intended, at the moment. And there's also a reference to millennials experiencing menopause, and it's referred to as the Menopause. And
okay, so now every day is a school day, because that's the first time I've heard of that.
Menopause. Yes.
How old are they? 20s?
No, they're coming into their 40s.
Oh, right. Okay.
So they're the millennials,
Menopause. Okay, wow.
The millennials are getting older.
Yeah.
Imagine how old I feel. So anyway, they are very well versed, and they'll be much more vocal in the workplace. So organisations need to be prepared for that. But they also be better advocates for themselves. They have period tracker apps. They come in, they know all about their symptoms and so on. But, sometimes people might think that they're perimenopausal because of mood, because of sleep. And it may not be. It may be lifestyle and so on. But there's a greater awareness. And to be honest, people have said to me before, don't you think, there's just too much talk about menopause? And I'd say, look, we went from an era of radio silence, taboo, gaslighting, all sorts, women just having an awful time. And then the pendulum will swing the other way. And eventually it will swing back into the centre at some point. And I'm all for that. So you do need to go, the pendulum does need to swing the other way. I also think, that people talk about over-medicalising menopause, given HRT and all the rest. I disagree with that too. I mean, if I look back at all the different treatments I was on in my 40s and the different tests included. I went to. Yes, magnets included. The cost, the suboptimal quality of life that I had from my health, all the different health issues, going for this test, going for that test, taking antibiotics, taking, women are often antidepressants sometimes unnecessarily, all those different things. My perimenopause was being medicalised in a very different way, and I wasn't getting any relief. So everything has a place. And yes, the pendulum has swung, and I'm delighted about that. But it will eventually, swing back into the middle. But definitely the menopause and the younger women are coming up, and they're much more vocal, and they're advocating for themselves in a way that, say, my generation are only learning to do now. And I think that's a great thing. It will force, the medical society, industry, everything to
pull their socks up and embrace it.
Yeah.
One thing you did say there, and it's something that I think it's an important, and it probably is a lovely close off to the whole conversation, is that you had a suboptimal quality of life.
Yeah.
And that's what we hear time and time again. And women should not be living suboptimal qualities of life. particularly when they're in this era and the age where maybe their kids are a little bit older, they should be beginning to enjoy their life again.
Yeah.
And then they're thrown into this. So if you're experiencing any kind of decrease in your quality of life, you definitely need to be going and asking questions, whether that be of your doctor, your pharmacist, or the Menopause Hub, of course.
Yeah.
Where can people find the Menopause Hub? Is it just Google it?
Yeah, so you can Google us, Menopause Hub, so the menopausehub.ie, and we've clinics in Mount Marion, in the north side, Santry, near IKEA, just opposite IKEA there, and in Ballincollig in Cork. You can also do virtual consultations, so you can live anywhere in the country and still do that. And so, yeah, you can check it out. You can book directly online for an appointment, or you can contact appointments at the menopausehub.ie, and one of my colleagues will deal with you. I have a few things, mantras. One is, if in doubt, check it out. And then the other one is, don't suffer in silence. And I genuinely mean that to every single woman that's listening.
Well, I would absolutely second that. It's like listening to myself sometimes, listening to you sitting there. Loretta, what piece of advice would you give young people today?
Young people today, I think in terms of health, I would say advocate for yourself. Do your research. I would say to all women, actually, be just careful about influencers and so on. I think there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and therefore you need to go to evidence-based trusted sources. So that's the thing, whatever your age. And then to a young person, I'd say, the world is your oyster. I say this to my kids all the time. When I was starting off in my career, it was, get a permanent pensionable job. But they will actually have multiple careers. And so I think, go for it. Do what you want. They say if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life. I'm not sure I can thoroughly agree with that, because it is hard work being an entrepreneur. It sounds sexy, but it's hard work. And although I love what I'm doing, I do, but it's
not as glamorous as it sounds.
No, but it's not as hard as doing something you don't love.
Yeah.
So I would just say to, that Nike or Nike, however it's pronounced, just do it. I'd say just do it.
And what is the meaning of life?
My mother used to have this great saying, which was, she passed away now, but she used to say, listen, there's no such thing as hell. Hell is on earth. And I think she's right with all the things that are thrown at us. So I think for me, my meaning in life is to try and live in the present, to learn every day, learn something new, and to try and either pay it forward or give back. They're my three things.
Loretta, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you on. Thanks so much.